Dr Bryce Edwards, he is a director of the Integrity Institute. Bryce, kia ora, good morning.
Maureen and Andrew.
The big news story at the moment, and it's kind of dominating the headlines, is the spat between the coalition partners, David Seymour, Winston Peters, and of course Christopher Luxon, about a response that David Seymour gave to a UN report. Firstly, on this one, wasn't it the case that everyone else was out of the country at the time, and so David Seymour was officer on the deck, or does that not count when it comes to UN letters?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we haven't quite got to grips, or we haven't heard from the government about the sequencing of this letter and the reply, because it did actually arrive apparently last month.
Okay.
So it wasn't clear why David Seymour, as acting Prime Minister, sent it. In fact, I believe he sent it more as being Minister for Regulation.
Yeah.
And so this letter was sent, of course, from the United Nations Rapporteur on Indigenous Rights.
Mm-hmm.
They sent this letter last month, talking generally about the new government's orientation to Indigenous issues, critiquing it, but focusing mostly on the Regulatory Standards Bill and pointing out that it doesn't give any place for the Treaty of Waitangi. It doesn't kind of acknowledge Māori tikanga or traditions, and it was quite critical and a bit of a slapdown to the government. So who was the right person to respond? Well, the UN is kind of in the diplomatic world, and so but it was about a bill that David Seymour has introduced into Parliament, and it's under his scope as Minister of Regulations. But so he sent the letter off back to the UN, but then when Winston Peters heard about this, he said, well, as Foreign Minister, communicating with the UN is really my role.
Yep.
So he demanded that it be retracted.
And hey, Christopher Luxon fronted the media and repeated some of his talking points in that regard. I did notice as well that when David Seymour was doubling down and saying, hey, UN Rapporteur, you are not an expert on Māori. I'm Māori, keep your nose out of it. I think even worse than David Seymour representing the government, David Seymour representing Māori, I'm sure some Māori would have a problem with that as well.
Yes, so it's all become a bit more of a culture war or a race relations issue on the Regulatory Standards Bill.
Yep.
Now, this is a pretty dry piece of legislation, but very important for both its proponents and opponents. But it's become in the last few weeks a lot more wrapped up in issues around, the Treaty of Waitangi and the place of Māori. And so, of course, that has made it a lot more colourful, shall we say, a lot more interesting, I guess, for the public. For the media.
Honestly, it is, as you say, it's quite a dry piece of legislation, and most media wouldn't take any notice of it, and most people, including myself, don't really understand it. It seems a shame, though, that David Seymour getting his hand slapped is dominating the media rather than a critique of whether or not this is a good piece of legislation, whether it would even meet its own standards, and particularly on the issue of whether or not there should be references to tiriti within government legislation, because this is a key point. Some people are saying, look, this is Treaty Principles Bill Part 2, and it's been sneaked through the House with the support of coalition partners using boredom as a cloaking device.
Oh, look, I agree with all that. I think it is always interesting when governments do look like they are infighting,
Yep.
and the public is interested in any sort of instability. So, and it's the role of the opposition to sort of amplify that, shall we say. But you're right, this is a substantive issue, and it's one I've been following very closely for quite a while. This bill, yes, it does sound dry, and there's a lot of debate about what it would actually do. And of course, ACT are very clear on why they want to do it. It's about cutting red tape. It's about reducing regulation. It's about producing better legislation. And so I think there's some agreement across the political spectrum that, we want to improve legislation,
Yeah.
that often it is badly put through Parliament,
Hmm.
and some of it is badly written and so forth. I think there's also, I think agreement from all of us that, sometimes we are over-regulated and there's some bad red tape that slows things down.
Yep.
But then it becomes a bit more of a left-right issue where the right of ACT especially want to really reduce red tape and
Exactly.
regulation,
And
whereas
I
those
think
on the left
I think it
want a
does
bit more
make
of it.
sense mostly. I suppose what David Seymour seems to be describing within this bill is this is what good regulation would look like from a libertarian political point of view. Of course, the libertarian political point of view represented by ACT is only a minority
Yeah,
within government. And the other aspect of it, which I think is interesting, is this does start to look like the Treaty Principles Bill, because let's take the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. It's a little bit confusing. Nobody really understands them. So how about David Seymour rewrites them in his own image so that he understands them and it fits with his worldview? Is a similar thing happening here when it comes to what good legislation looks like, do you think?
well, I hadn't thought of it like that, but I think you're quite right that this is one party's view of how to tidy up regulations, and they're trying to sell it as a very common sense thing. But there's no doubt in my mind that it does actually have a lot of ACT ideology in it. It is
Yep.
rather libertarian, and even though ACT is sort of suggesting that no, this will only provide guidance to governments. This won't actually enforce anything on governments. I think it will actually have an impact. If every time a new piece of legislation is being written up, government departments will have to decide, does this fit with basically David Seymour's idea of regulation?
Yep.
And of course, there's the talk about compensation.
Mm.
So some of the bill has to, or it means that government has to think about, are they taking away private property rights
Yep.
off any company? And if so, they should be thinking about, should they be financially compensating them for it?
On the
And so,
on the
yeah.
surface, this sounds like more red tape, not less. Honestly, this
Oh,
sounds like
indeed.
we're
It,
adding
it
more
certainly will.
processes
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
legislative process. Yeah.
That's the irony of it. It certainly will tie up governments a bit more. It will, require more bureaucrats, more law to do this, and so it does sound kind of counterintuitive. Um, but ultimately, yes, it will cut some of the regulations, but you just have to remember that regulations are there for a
Yeah.
reason, and you have to be careful about which ones you cut.
Yeah. Taking out
Because
the
it
ones
can
that
be
ACT doesn't like and putting in ones that it does like is essentially what's happening. The other thing I'd like your comment on here is whether or not the bill itself meets the standards of what good legislation looks like. It's been held up as saying this bill will mean that all legislation will be done better. This doesn't seem to have been done particularly well. A bit of a rush through without much robust debate and scrutiny.
Well, I guess there's different aspects to this, and there's no perfect way for a bill to proceed, but this is actually the fourth time that ACT have brought this bill to the table. So over the last 15 or 20 years, they've had other private members' bills that are pretty much the same thing, but
Yep.
they've been defeated in Parliament. So it has been discussed a fair bit, but no, there was no great discussion during the election campaign from ACT that this is a bottom line for them. So it is a bit surprising.
Hmm.
We're now having a select committee debate, and I think that's quite good.
Yeah. And the major difference with this one, though, and this is certainly the major difference between Treaty Principles Bill, is that there is a coalition agreement to say that this bill will pass. It will be
Exactly.
supported by the other coalition parties. That is significantly different, and perhaps this is why the media is looking for some type of division when, hey, all the coalition partners have signed off on this. This is going to be legislation, but hey, probably chucked out the next time we have a change of government.
Well, yes, basically National and New Zealand First had to agree to this during the formation of the coalition, and they've signed their name up to it, so they have to support it. New Zealand First, in particular, I think has a lot of reservations.
Yep.
They don't really want to be connected with this, and some of the opponents are hoping that Winston Peters basically pulls the plug on this. But of course, that would
cause problems. Yeah.
that would cause problems in the coalition.
Hey, appreciate
A lot,
more
a
than
lot
just
more than any letter to the UN.
Yeah, exactly. More than a slap on the wrist with a wet bus ticket. Hey, Bryce, appreciate your insight on this. And hey, there is certainly more to be looked at in this space. But hey, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.